My name is Christelle Rabil. I am the Genesys assistant at the Crop Trust. For those of you who joined the first part of the webinar series, you will be familiar with this presentation that will precede the demonstration. But we will have a run over a few technical notes for those of us who are new, who didn't join the first part. So, welcome again. For the second part of this webinar series, we have more than 100 registrants from 46 countries and coming from 70 different institutes. It's a very diverse list of attendees. Keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind that different people, different attendees use Excel in different languages, we have to be mindful of one important note about Excel, that the functions in Excel differ according to the version of Excel you use in your own language. So we are very familiar with a lot of functions in Excel in English and in the layout for those of us who use it in English. But for the participants who use it in French, Spanish, or other languages, those functions and the tools will be named differently. So we will see how we will address that later on during the live demonstration. Also, for those of you who didn't join the first part, I will briefly run over what we covered to bring you up to speed. So the first part of this webinar mainly covered data cleaning. So that means making data legible and finding hidden data in comments and hidden columns or far away in the sheet, for example. That was the main focus of the first part. But today, during this webinar, we will take it for granted that the data is cleaned already, and we will focus on standardizing the data to the data standard that we use in Genesys, and that is primarily used for passport data, which is called MCPD version 2.1. If we have some time, we would cover a bit of data validation using some tools we developed at Genesys to help during that validation process. But if we don't have time for that today, we will cover it in part 3 of this webinar series. So what we already covered in the first part is, again, some data cleaning, for example, finding hidden data and making data legible. And it also covered splitting columns into many or merging many columns into one in order to transform them into MCPD descriptors. So that was covered already. And what we would do today is we would map the labels and coded values to MCPD. And we would also address some data formats for the values that are not coded, such as dates, countries of origins, institute codes, how do we handle multiple entries, geo-coordinates, and missing values. And time permits, we would go through data validation. What you would be seeing on the screen is, during the live demonstration, is first the main Excel working space. So that's the working area where the demonstration will happen. But you will also see on the right-hand side of the screen a functions translator. That's an Excel plugin. Whenever I would be using a function in English, I will then translate it to French or Spanish for those of you who are practicing in parallel to this webinar. And also what you will see on top of the functions translator is the English keyboard. I will enable it just for you to see what shortcuts I am typing on the keyboard during the live demonstration. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen right now. Just please give me a few minutes and I will move to Excel and we will start the live demonstration. What you see here is the original sample that we used in the previous part. That's how it was like. So we had some hidden rows, We had hidden columns at some point. We had data that was far, far away in the sheet. We had notes so that we had data that was found in notes that had hidden text also. At some point, there was a hidden text here. So that was what we worked with in the first part. We also had a lot of spaces that needed to be cleaned up. We had a lot of uppercases and that we needed to make lowercase, etc. So that was all covered in part 1. And this is the final result of part 1. That's how it looks like, the data sample. And we will go from there in part 2 of this webinar series. We will go from there, having already covered all the previous steps. So what we would be focusing on today, as I mentioned, is mapping column headers and mapping individual values to the MCPD standard. So in order to do that, we first need to prepare a few tables that we will have at hand that we will use in all of the mapping to MCPD exercises. Anytime you have a passport data sheet that you want to map to MCPD, then you will be able to use those lookup tables. You would have them ready at hand instead of manually mapping every time different column headers and different entries. So I will first start by creating the lookup table of my column headers. And a very important step before mapping the column headers to the MCPD standard is actually making sure that you understand the definition of every column in your own data, that you understand the definition really well, especially when it comes to some problematic headers that might cause some confusion. For example, collecting source. Some people might understand it as a country. Other people might understand it as a type of field. So before starting to map in MCPD, make sure the definition of every column in your own data is well understood. And also if there are some that require units, for example, elevations, so make sure that those are very clear and specified. And the next step, so after you understand your own data, a very important part is also to understand, so there would be a lot of reading that needs to happen before starting the mapping of the MCPD standard itself. So I will share a link later with you when I share the documentation of this webinar and the link to the recording. I will also share with you some useful links like the MCPD standard link in its latest version. So please make sure that you read it really well and that you also understand the definitions of every descriptor in that standard and every unit and every format in order to make sure that you are matching exactly one-to-one the exact descriptor in your own data to the exact descriptor of MCPD so that you don't match accidentally something that is supposed to be, for example, the collecting institute code, so that you don't match it accidentally for the collecting number. So after you do this reading and this understanding of the definitions of your own descriptors and the MCPD descriptor, that's when you can start working in Excel with the data. So to create the lookup table then after this of the column headers, I will start then a new sheet and I will re-enable the keyboard so that you see the shortcut I am using. So I want to select all of my headers. So I press on the first one and then I press Command, Shift, and then the arrow going to the right. I would do it again. So I click on the first header, Command Shift, arrow to the right, and then I click on Control-C to copy. And then I go to the new sheet that I created, and I don't paste right away. I go to the home ribbon. There's the paste button. So click on the little arrow here and click on transpose, because I want this row to be transposed in a column in order to map every one of my descriptors to the MCPD ones. So now I want to just clean this up a little bit. I want to clear the format. We already covered clearing formats in part 1. So very quickly, I will select all of this data here. I will go to the home ribbon. You see this button that looks like an eraser. Click on the arrow and click on clear formats, to get rid of the green background. And here I have then a list, my column names, all of them in a list. And now I can go to my MCPD standard here. And based on the understanding I have from my column names and from the MCPD definition, I should map this code here. So this descriptor, which is in all caps, which is unique for every descriptor in the MCPD standard, and which really avoids any issues because it doesn't have spaces in between. Spaces can create issues if accidentally you have double spaces. So I know this is manual right now, like at the moment, but if you create this table, this sheet for your column headers and you save it, you keep it at hand, whenever you want to do the same exercise for different passport data sheets that might be in archives or that might come in newly to you, or if your existing passport data is already in many different Excel files, once you've done this manual labor once you've done this mapping, which I've already done here, so I've already matched original column names to their mapped MCPD descriptor. I've done this once and I save this table and I use it for every sheet later on. Of course, it would be easier if you use a database, but for those who use Excel to handle passport data, this would save a lot of effort and time for later. So this is when it comes to mapping columns in MCPD, like you would copy or type in those in your Excel sheet, for example, accession number. You read really well the definition of what that means, and then you copy and paste it here. If for example, certain columns in your own data are not applicable to MCPD, for example, taxonomy, the entire scientific name, then you keep it blank. If there are columns that do apply that you don't want to map, you have this genus original column that we previously worked on in part 1 that still had spaces that we didn't clean up. So I don't want to map this one. I want to map the final one to MCPD. So you decide in your own data which columns to skip, which ones to map as final ones. And then after you are finished with this process, you select all of this array of all this table and you press, so you select all and you press Control. I will re-enable the keyboard. You press Control-T and you make sure if you didn't name those two columns, you make sure to untick this this one, and then you press OK. And you can title this My Original Column Headers. And then here, mapped to MCPD. And now you have this lookup table. I already created one in this sheet for the data sample that we are using today. So I will delete this one that we just did for demonstration purposes. And then I will proceed with creating the same. So with the same approach, I am going to do for 4 different columns. Those are the coded values in MCPD, which are the collecting source, the biological status of your material, the status in the MLS, and the storage type. So for collecting source, again, if I go to the MCPD standard and I look for that descriptor, I see a list of codes that go from 10 to 99, and there are even subsections under 10 and 20 that kind of are more granulated information, more detailed information about the main type of collecting source. You can either use the general one, or if in your passport data you have it more specified what type of wild habitat, you can use the more granulated information. So again, what I would do, the same as I did for the headers. I have my collecting sources here. I try to make sure that I understand every entry really well and that I understand its match really well. That farms, what I'm trying to say is that make sure that farm store in the MCPD means really farm store in your own data, just as an example. So what I would do is I would create a new sheet. I mean, I already did it here for demonstration, but let's do it together again. So I'll create a new sheet and I will enable the keyboard. So I want to select all of the data here. So I press on the first one, Command Shift arrow down. So Command Shift down arrow, Control C, Control V. And I see that there are a lot of duplicated values here, right? So since there are a lot of duplicated values, I don't want to do the mapping 4 times for the same one. What I recommend doing in this case for the different entries is select all of this data here by pressing Command Shift down. And then if you go to the data ribbon, you would see this symbol here that's called Remove Duplicates. Make sure that all the data here is selected, go to the data ribbon, and click on this button, Remove Duplicates. You can indicate if your list has a header or not. In this case, my list is not named, doesn't have a header, so I keep this unticked. And I select all of column A. So I keep those 2 checked, and I click OK. And then Excel is telling me that it found 8 duplicated values, and they removed them. So now I am left with a smaller amount of information to manually map to MCPD. So I see here that field, is 21. Roadside in MCPD is 61. From field and field are the same, 21, but in my own data, they're not called the same. So what I would do is I would number them. So I would give field and from field the same number because in my own data, they're not the same. But then I will use this lookup table to map them both to 21 automatically. And I do the same for all the rest. So farm store is 26. Breeding Institute So breeding institute is here, 40. Backyard is 23. And farm store again, but here with a space, is again 26. I already have it, but with space. So I make sure that all my original entries are as they are copied and pasted as they are in my data, my passport data, so that I can automatically map them later on using this lookup table. So once I've done this for collecting source, I will press Command. So I will select all my array, Command T. My table does not have headers, so I keep this unchecked. I click OK. So I just created this table for my mapped collecting source entries to MCPD. I can label those my original collecting source, and then here mapped to MCPD. So I already have done the same exercise for collecting source for the biological status of the accession, whether it's wild, landrace, breeding, and for the status in the MLS. So the values for the status in the MLS are either included or not included. That would be 1 or 0. For storage, you have seed collection and then more information about that, whether it's short-term, medium-term, long-term. So we have 10 or 11, 12, 13. So you do the same for those 4 descriptors in your data: biological status of the accession, collecting source, status in the MLS, and storage. And you've already also, you can also do it for your column headers. And you've had, now then you can save those lookup tables somewhere, and you can go back to them every time you are going to do this mapping to MCPD that we will apply later on in this live demonstration. So right now we only mapped in separate files. We will apply the mapping to this data sample later on in this demonstration. But before we do that, another thing to have at hand that is useful is some existing tables to have ready. And I will show you 3 of those right now. So the first one is the list of views codes. So gene banks and institutes that are involved in agriculture or the conservation of plant genetic resources normally have a code that is assigned by the FAO, by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. That's what we call views code. Every institute has a unique one. If a gene bank or a seed bank or an institute that deals with plant genetic resources doesn't have one, you can request that from the team of the FAO. I will share with you in the chat the link of this list of all views codes that are there. And then I will share my screen and show you how you can download this list and have it ready at hand. So in the link that I posted in the chat, if you click on it, you should land on this page. You can automatically check every organization one by one for the views codes. For example, if I search by acronym for the organization IITA, and I click search, I will get the results of all the organizations in this database that have the acronym including IITA. So you get a list of different views codes that include this acronym. But if you don't want to do this one by one, if you want to have all the database downloaded, just go back to search, make sure that all of those fields are empty, and make sure that in this drop-down menu here, you select valid only. because some views codes might be old, might be invalidated or discarded, archived. You only are interested in the valid ones, probably, so you can download, you can first search for these entries only, click the search button. And then you would get around 18,000 different results. That's all of the valid views codes. If you click on download search, download results, it would take a while, but what you would end up with is this list of all valid views codes with the details of the institutes. You would have it ready at hand. It's gonna take a while, so I will show you already the one that I've downloaded. So you have here the list of all views codes that are valid, matched with the name of the organization acronym, and more details about it, mainly also the country where this organization is located. So if you want to quickly look for the views codes of, let's say, for example, Svalbard, you can search in this column of the name of the organization, click filter and search for Svalbard. And you get here this entry for the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. And you have it as NOR 051. If you want to, for example, visualize or search among the views codes of that are assigned for the country, for example, of Benin, you click here on, you filter out in the country column, you filter out for BEN, that's the country code of Benin, and then you have the list of all of the countries in Benin. So that's like a quick access to the views database that whenever you want to check in your own passport data names of organizations and you want to match them to their views codes, you can use this as a quick way. So that's useful to have at hand. I will close this for now and show you another useful list to have ready at hand. And I also will share the link in the chat. So you saw that we filtered for the countries. We filtered for the countries by the ISO code. I didn't type in Benin, I typed BEN, right? So a useful list to have at hand is the list of all the countries matched with their ISO code. That's a 3-letter code. So the link here is in the chat. If you click on it, you will end up here on this, this list. You will have the name of the country in the first column. Let me zoom in. So you will have the name of the country, and then you will have the Alpha 2 ISO code and the Alpha 3 ISO code. Genesys and in the MCPD standard and in the views code, the way they are assigned, what is used is the Alpha 3 ISO code of every country. For example, Albania is ALB, Bangladesh is PGD. It's good to have this list at hand because you might encounter this need for you to know the Alpha 3 code of countries, either in your search in Genesys or in the views codes database or in other databases. And in the MCPD standard, everything related to countries is used as an Alpha 3 code. So the way you can download this list is either by clicking here on the download raw file, or by copying here and pasting in Excel and then saving the file and having it ready at hand. So save all these lookup tables and downloaded tables in a folder that you will refer to every time you are handling passport data. I see a question in the chat. I will go through it. So someone's asking, our institute name has changed now. How do we change it in the views database? The way to do that is to contact the views teams with this change. I will share with you the email in a bit of the views team. I will post it right now in the chat, and you can email them and let them know your institute code and the change that happened. They will probably send you a Word document that you fill out, and then you send it back, and then the change would be visible on the views website. Maybe it would take a week or so. I am going to proceed with, now we have all these useful tables at hand, our own lookup tables that we created for the different descriptors and for the column names. Now we want to apply the mapping to MCPD. So I will go to the data sample that I have here at hand. Right now, my data is in a table, but in order to change the column names, I will need to transform my table into an array. So I need to kind of disconnect my data from the table, make it a regular array. And then after I map the column names to MCPD and delete the original ones, I will recreate the table with the newly mapped columns to MCPD. So to do that, select the first cell here, and then Control A. This selects all of the table. And in this table ribbon, you have this option here to convert to a range. So you click on that. And Excel gives you an alert. Do you really want to convert this to a normal range instead of an Excel table? Click yes. And now when you click in this table, you don't see this table ribbon anymore. It's a normal range. So it would be easier than to change the column headers. It would be actually possible to delete this and work with it. So then after that, after you've transformed your table to a range or to a regular array, click on the first row and then right click, and then click on insert. So you want to add a row above everything else. And this is where you would apply a function that is very useful in Excel. I will zoom in and I will go to the functions translator. So the function's name in English is vlookup. You might be familiar with it, but some people aren't. So if you use Excel in Spanish, because I know that some of you do, it's not going to be called like this. So I will do the translation to Spanish in this functions translator. So vlookup in English would be buscarve in Spanish. So please just make note of that. And in French, vlookup in French would be recherche V. Also, please make note of that. I will send you documentation after this webinar detailing how you can enable the functions translator for your Excel if you need it. And also, I will send you the recording, so you will have these. You will be able to get back to these functions later on. So I will use them now in English, and I will click on the first cell here, the very first one, the sign equals. So I'm opening a function in Excel, and I'm typing in my function that is vlookup. And I start a parentheses, and I have to enter 4 different values in this function in order for it to return my MCPD match, the one that I saved in the lookup table. So first of all, I have to choose what am I looking up exactly? Which cell in this sheet? So I'm looking up my column header. So I click on A2, Institute in this case. Then I click on comma, space. Now Excel is telling me, please select where do you find the match for this value? Where is the match located? In this case, in this example, the match is located in a sheet that we created together moments ago. That is my lookup table for the column headers matched to their MCPD values. So I click on this sheet while I am still in the function. I just go to the sheet, click on it. And I don't click on anything else. I'm still in the function. You can still see it here. Don't click escape. Just click on all of the array here, all of this table. And while you are still there, click on comma, space. Now you have to enter the third variable, which is in this table array, where is the match located? Which column number? Is it column number 1 that you want to return or column number 2? In this case, I want Excel to look up in this column and return the second one. I want Excel to return the mapped values to MCPD. So that's where I indicate the number 2 here in the functions bar. And the last variable is, do you want, so you click on 2 and then comma. Then you have to choose, do you want an approximate match or do you want an exact match? In my case, I want an exact match. Exactly, if you find this exactly written the same way, then return this. So I want an exact match. So I press on false, and then I close the parentheses. And where I am right now, I just click enter. And you see, Excel took me back to my original sheet where I started the function, and it returned automatically my initial, the match for my initial column name. It returned automatically the MCPD match. Now I want to apply the same for the rest of the column names. So what I suggest you do then is hover over this first cell until you see a black cross symbol. So you probably know this click and drag in Excel. So you click and then you drag this function until the end of your table. So you see here that for every column name in my own data that I already matched to MCPD, I got the match. But for the ones that I chose to not match to anything, I have 0 instead. So now we are going to use the same function, VLOOKUP, to map collecting source. So we already have created the collecting source matches to MCPD from our own data to the MCPD standard. We have that table saved somewhere. For this demonstration, it's in this file, but you can have it in a separate file. So I want to add a column here, a new one. So I select right next to collecting source, I select the column next to it, insert. And I want to match those values to my MCPD matches. So in this case, press on equals, type the function VLOOKUP, or in French, recherche V, or in Spanish, buscar. So you are looking up this value, you click on it, press comma space. Where can you find the match? So you have to go to the sheet where you have your lookup table for collecting source. So click on this sheet and select all this array. Then press on comma, space. You now want to indicate which one of those columns do you want to return. And I want to return, in this case, the second one, because this is the one that had my MCPD matches. So press 2, then comma, and select false, or you can also type false, because it's better to select the exact match instead of getting an approximate. So press false or type it in, then close the parentheses and press enter. You see here, we went back to the original data sample with the match to MCPD. And if you want to apply this for the rest of the column, you click on the cell here that you applied the function to, and you drag. And you see here automatically now, your collecting source is matched automatically to the values of MCPD. And you can do the same for biological status, for status in the MLS, and for, here we have the storage. So that's a very useful way of matching to MCPD, and you can apply the same for different sheets of passport data, if that's your case. But here's a very important note to keep in mind when you use any function in Excel. So if I decide for some reason to delete this column entirely, the original one, let's say this is the final collecting source. I will delete this previous step for now. And if I decide to delete the original one, you will see an error in the final collecting source. The values would disappear. So I'll do that again. So we have here our original collecting source. We have the match to MCPD using the function that we used. If I decide to delete the first column, right now, my final values, my matches to MCPD are going to disappear because they are still linked here. If you click on any one of those cells, you will see that they are still linked to a column that doesn't exist anymore, that was deleted. So I will Control Z, I will revert back what I just did. And I will show you how you can disconnect your values from the function. So in order to do that, an easy way is to select all of your values here. So on the first cell, Command Shift down, copy, Control C, and then go to the home ribbon, paste, but don't click on paste, just click on the arrow. And if you scroll down in this menu, you will see paste values. So if you click on the paste values, while you are still on the same selection, you have now disconnected your matches to MCPD from the function. So now you see 26 or 21, you don't see the VLOOKUP function anymore. So what would happen is that in case you delete this original column, you still have the values. They are not shown as an error. So this covered the coded values mainly, but in the MCPD standard and in passport data, you don't only deal with coded values, like the codes we just saw, you also deal with different data types. So you deal with dates, with countries, country names, geographical data. So I will show you one of the most common data types that you have in your passport data, probably, that is date. It's either the acquisition date or the date when your sample was collected from the field. Those two dates are part of MCPD. And if you are using Excel to handle passport data, you probably have encountered some issues with dates in Excel. So if your dates have turned into numbers, first of all, the reason why this happens in Excel is that Excel understands dates as numbers, a number of days after 1st of January, 1900. So any day that we use commonly is probably after that date in Excel. And then Excel turns these dates into numbers. And this is why, when you clear formats, this might happen, because that's how Excel understands dates, as number of days. So I don't want to see my dates of acquisition or collection as number of days after the 1900s. I want to see them as, as I'm seeing them here right now, days, months, years. So what you can do, the easiest way to circumvent that is to select all of your column dates. So Command Shift down. I selected all my dates that are for acquisition. And in the home ribbon, you go to General, click on the menu and scroll all the way down to more number formats. So you want a custom type of format. Why? Because in the MCPD standard, if I go back to the PDF, I will read that acquisition date and all dates in Excel are in this format: year first, and then month, and then day. They have no spaces in between, no slashes or anything. Sorry. So Excel, if you go to this custom number formats and you type in year 4 times, so 4 Ys, 2 Ms, and 2 Ds, year, month, date, and you click OK, Excel will transform this number that is effectively a date into this format that we decided that matches the format of MCPD. So I will repeat the last step, I will repeat it before moving on. So I select all of my dates in the home ribbon. I go to the number formats, select this menu, scroll all the way down to more, press on custom in this list, and type in year, month, day. That's my MCPD day format. Click OK. And then the numbers are transformed to year, month, day. So the next type of data format that you will need to work out in Excel or transform to MCPD, you have this a lot in your GeneBank, is the geographical data. So if we go to the MCPD standard again and read about geographical coordinates, for example, longitude or decimal latitudes. So the MCPD standard accepts that you have your latitudes and longitudes as degrees, minutes, seconds, but it also accepts them in decimal formats. So there are these 2 formats. The latitude usually has to precede the longitude. So in your columns, it's better if you have latitude first and then longitude. And for Genesys, so when you are uploading data to Genesys, or when you are using the Genesys passport data validator tool that I will show you later on, it is better to have your geographical data in the decimal format. So not in degrees, minutes, seconds, not in this type of format, but in decimals. And I will show you right now how you can convert your latitudes and longitudes from degrees, minutes, seconds to decimals. So let's say you want to start with the latitude. Basically, the idea of conversion of these geographical coordinates in Excel is to split the numbers and the sign into different columns, and then use a formula of adding or dividing to add them up and have the decimal value. Because the decimal latitude is basically the degree plus the minute divided by 60 plus the seconds divided by 3,600. So if you can split up the latitudes and the longitudes into different columns, then you can apply these steps. So you can do this function. So I will add right next to the latitude column, I will add maybe 4 different ones. And I want to select all of my latitude data. And I want to go to the data ribbon in Excel. And I want to split up, I want to use the text to column in order to split up this into different columns. So I would do this over many different steps. I would repeat this process in order to have all of my latitude split up into different numbers. So the first thing I want to split up is I want to have the polarity, south or north. I want to have it in a column standalone. So I click on all of the latitude column, press on text to columns. And in this case, I choose fixed width because I'm splitting my column based on the first character. So I want the first character to be in a separate column and then all the rest in another one. So I select fixed width. And then here I can indicate in Excel the break line where Excel would break my cell into 2. And in this case, it's after 1 character only. So on this scale, I press on the first tick. And you can see here the break line that Excel creates right after south. So it means that south will be in one column and the rest will be in another one. I click next. And here you can indicate the column number format or the column format. You can do that later. For now, I will just click finish. And you click OK. So we messed up the titles here because it's not in a table anymore, but you can call this latitude polarity and then latitude. Now I will call this column minutes, degrees. And then the next one, latitude minutes. And then the final one is latitude seconds. And I want to now split my degrees from my minutes and seconds, the same way I did for the polarity. So I will select all of my data here. And I will click again, text to columns. But right now, I'm not going to use fixed width because it might be 1 character or 2 characters, depending on my degree. So I don't want to specify a specific number of characters. I just want to separate based on the sign of the degree itself. So I'll cancel and I'll go to one of these cells and copy the degree sign. I use that as my separator. I select all the data again, and I go to data, text to columns, and I select the delimited option to split up my columns. I click next, and I click on other, and I paste the degree sign that I copied. And you see here the break line is where the degree sign is located. So I click on next and finish. Okay. And now I have my degrees split in a separate column, and I apply the same for the minutes. And eventually for the seconds, I will just clean up the 2 marks at the end. So for the minutes, I want to apply the same, but split them in this case according to this mark here. So I copy it. I copy this mark, and I select all of my data here. And in the data ribbon, I click on text to columns. And I press on delimited again. But now in other, I indicate that it's delimited with the mark. And you see the breakup line here is created automatically. Next, finish, okay. I have my minutes here. And now all is left are my seconds. But my seconds are not a number because not all the character in the cell are numbers. I have those that turn this into a text. So I definitely don't go and delete them one by one. What you can do is you select them. You select from one of the cells and copy these symbols. And then you select all of your data, go to the home ribbon, find and select, click on replace from that menu. So you want to find, so you paste, you want to find this symbol and replace it with nothing across all of your cells here. So then you click on replace all. And Excel is telling you that, we made 15 replacements in this case. And automatically your seconds turn into a number. You don't see them on the left side. They automatically move to the right side, which means that all of these now are numbers. So now I want to apply the formula in order to add up the degrees, minutes, seconds, to turn them into decimals, right? And this would be my absolute latitude. It doesn't have a sign yet, positive or negative, because I still have the polarity here that I will add later. So latitude, absolute. And I want to apply an equation. It's not really a function. So you start the equation with equals the degree. So the decimal latitude, sorry, I will call this decimal latitude. In the first cell, I press on enter. So it's equals the degrees added plus, you open the parentheses. So it's the degrees plus the minutes divided by 60. So plus this cell divided by 60, close the parentheses, and then added to it plus, open the parentheses, the seconds, so this cell, divided by 3,600. You close the parentheses and press enter. And here you have, your decimal latitude in absolute format, an absolute value. So you want to apply the same for the rest of the column. You'll click. So here the function, you want to click it and drag it until the end. And it applies the same. If here is 14, then the function will automatically change that. If here is 20. So now your values are still connected to these columns. You can disconnect them, of course. We saw previously how to do that by selecting all of these values, copying, staying where you are, and then not selecting anything else, just staying in that selection, clicking on the home ribbon, paste, menu, paste values. So now you have disconnected them from the functions. They are showing up as values, and you can delete all of those columns that are separating degrees, minutes, and seconds. But now we still haven't addressed the polarity in this case. So I will add a column that would be my final decimal latitude as it is spelled out in the MCPD standard. And I want to use an if function to say, if my latitude polarity is south, then this should be negative. And if my latitude polarity is north, then this should be positive. So that's an if function. So the if function, you start it up by typing equals if, and then you want to type in what's the logical test. So if the latitude polarity, if this cell equals, and you open the text brackets and you type in S, you close the text brackets, and then you press comma. So if this is south, then return the absolute value times -1 to make it negative. So then return, so open the parentheses, then return this, U2, this cell, times -1. Otherwise, return the same cell. So if the polarity is not south, just return it as it is in absolute form, and it would be positive. Then close the parentheses and click enter. And you see here, and if you click and drag, you see that it's all negative because all of my polarity is south. If one of them is north, the minus will disappear. So now you have your final decimal latitude. This is about conversion from degree, minutes, seconds to decimal. This is for the latitude, but you can do exactly the same steps for the longitude. In this case, the east would be positive and the west would be negative. I will also send you these as part of the documentation because they can be confusing sometimes. So it would be good to have it on one sheet of paper as a reminder whenever you're doing these conversions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And if you have any questions, please also feel free to send them to helpdesk of Genesys separately. And yes, we will definitely share the YouTube link for the 2 sessions with the documentation on the steps. All right, have a good evening or day wherever you are, and see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.